this is my hot take. And as soon as you tell me that you don't need a framework and you can do everything in vanilla JS or whatever, um, basically that tells me that you've got your own framework that you use, and you expect everybody to conform to your framework rather than conforming yourself to the frameworks that everybody else understands, right? Um, Anytime somebody tells me that they want to use vanilla JS, I'm going to go look at their code and they're going to have ways that they do certain things, right? And they do it in every project where they do vanilla JS, right? Um, Very, very wise, because if we use frameworks like React and Angular and Vue, right, the big three right now, people understand how to do things in React, right? The majority of people understand how to do things in React. A large number of people understand how to do things in Angular, and Angular is becoming more popular, right? A large people understand how to do things in Vue, and I have a couple of Angular friends who really like Vue better than Angular, and are thinking about moving that direction. Um, the benefit is that we can bring people on board faster, right? There's always an onboarding process regardless, but a lot of the language is already there. Once you start implementing your own thing and going down your own implementations, you increase that cost of bringing new people on. But more than that, you're slowly separating those people from the mainstream. And so it becomes more difficult, right? Um, like, here's the mainstream frameworks, right? And you hire devs and you peel them off, and the more they work with your framework, the further away they are. But at some point, as the mainstream just continues on, they've got to merge back in, right? The cost of this merge is what you're expecting them to pay. And it may not even be a curve like this, right? It could be an exponential curve where they just get further and further away. And so the cost that you're pushing onto them to get back into mainstream dev so that they can find a job in the future, or so that they can help out other developers, can become expensive, right? Just depending on the cost of this curve, right? This is an e to the x type curve, right? This is an exponential curve. Well, no, this is an e to the x. This is a log x, right? But right, you can definitely hurt people by the choices you make, especially as you get higher and higher into an organization, and you get more and more power to make decisions. You can be damaging the people that come work for your organization. And this is where right, like early on in your career, it's good to be opinionated, right? It's good to care about React versus Angular versus Vue. I encourage it wholeheartedly to participate in those debates and things like that. You need to develop those strong core principles, right? As you mature in your career, it's less important to be participating in those passion things and start thinking deeply about what is the cost of what I'm talking about, right? It's okay to maintain some of that passion, but if your passion is costing people, right? If you're digging people into these holes, right? And it's harder and harder for them to climb out, right? The further we take them away from the mainstream, the more difficult it is for them to communicate with their peers, the more difficult it is for them to understand their peers, right? There's something to be said about sticking close to the mainstream. So Ole, your comment is very, very apt in that, right? Sticking close to something that everybody understands is almost always better than going off on your own, right? You could probably point to performance. You could probably point to a whole bunch of other things. And if that is if that is the problem you're trying to solve, performance or whatever else, then by all means, right? Um, but if the thing you're trying to solve is I hate NGRX, um, that's not good enough to be digging people into these holes, right? It's perfectly fine for you to dig yourself into a hole, but once you start bringing others along, the cost of your decisions is not just you. And like morally, as an engineer, you need to realize that the costs of your decisions don't affect just you; they affect everybody else who comes along and works on the stuff that you're working on. And as you get more and more power to make more and more decisions, your ability to dig people into these holes and the number of people you can dig into these holes becomes bigger and bigger, right? Um, so just be very very careful about attacking the mainstream patterns. It's okay to critique mainstream patterns. I don't want to encourage everybody to be like, oh, just follow along with mainstream. No, you should be critiquing, you should be thinking through. And that's why in software development things change so quickly, is that people are thinking critically about it. What isn't okay is for me to attack something because I don't like it or don't understand it, and to dig people into these holes, right? Hopefully that makes sense.